Gold Thread Studios. Gangnam Nights. Season 1, Episode 3. The Letter That Waited 22 Years. Chapter 1. Before Sunrise. A single piano note hangs in the darkness. Soft bamboo wind chimes. Far away, the first birds begin greeting the morning. A deep cello quietly joins beneath the melody. The atmosphere is peaceful, yet heavy with expectation. Morning arrives differently at the Kang estate. It does not rush. It unfolds. Mist drifted gently across the manicured gardens, weaving between centuries-old pine trees whose branches had watched generations come and go. The koi pond lay perfectly still. Not even the fish disturbed its mirror-like surface. The first rays of sunlight had not yet climbed over the eastern hills. Everything waited, as though the estate itself understood that this morning carried more weight than most. Kang Ji-hoon's sedan rolled slowly through the wrought iron gates. The security guards bowed respectfully. The familiar gravel driveway crunched softly beneath the tires. Normally, arriving at his father's estate felt like returning to another world. Today, it felt like walking toward a question that had been waiting for him his entire life. He switched off the engine. For a long moment, he simply sat. His father's message echoed once more inside his thoughts. Come to the estate tomorrow morning. Alone. Nothing more. No explanation. That was the chairman's way. Few words. Many meanings. Ji-hoon stepped from the car. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of pine needles and damp earth left behind by the night's rain. His footsteps slowed naturally. Some places demanded quieter voices. This was one of them. A gardener bowed while trimming a hedge. An elderly groundskeeper swept fallen persimmon leaves from a stone pathway. Neither interrupted the silence. The estate had always understood that peace was something worth protecting. Then, Ji-hoon saw him. Chairman Kang. Standing alone beneath the enormous persimmon tree. The tree was older than Kang Holdings itself. Its branches stretched across the eastern garden like patient hands reaching toward the sky. Golden fruit still clung stubbornly to a few upper branches. Chairman Kang rested one hand lightly against the weathered trunk. Not speaking. Simply watching dawn arrive. For a brief moment, he looked less like the chairman of one of Korea's most powerful companies, and more like an old man remembering promises no one else knew existed. Ji-hoon approached quietly. He bowed. Father. Chairman Kang returned the bow with the smallest nod. You came early. You asked me to. I know. Neither smiled. Not because affection was absent. Because respect had always spoken louder than emotion between them. The silence lingered comfortably. Birdsong slowly replaced the night's last whispers. Somewhere beyond the garden wall, temple bells marked the beginning of another day. Chairman Kang finally spoke. When I was your age, I believed intelligence could solve every problem. His eyes remained on the horizon. I was wrong. Ji-hoon listened. His father rarely offered stories without purpose. There are burdens. The chairman continued. That cannot be solved. They can only be carried. The words settled between them like autumn leaves. Not dramatic. Simply true. Without another word, Chairman Kang reached inside his charcoal overcoat. He removed an envelope. Cream-colored. Its edges had softened with time. The paper had yellowed after decades of careful handling. Someone had opened it many times, then folded it closed again with almost reverent care. He held it gently, as though it weighed far more than paper ever should. Ji-hoon's eyes never left it. What is it? A promise. His father answered quietly. And a failure. Ji-hoon frowned slightly. I don't understand. You will. The chairman looked down at the envelope one final time, then offered it to his son. Ji-hoon accepted it carefully. His normally steady hands felt strangely uncertain. The paper was warm, almost as though someone else had been holding it only moments before. Across the front, only 6 handwritten words appeared. If I do not return. Nothing else. No address. No recipient. Only those 6 words. Ji-hoon looked back toward his father. Who wrote it? Chairman Kong met his eyes. Seo Min-jae. Everything became still. Even the birds seemed to fall silent. The name that had haunted the mysterious file now rested inside his hands. Not as government evidence. Not as corporate history. But as something far more personal. Ji-hoon whispered. My file said the investigation was closed. His father's expression barely changed. The government closed the case. He paused. I never did. The morning sun finally broke above the eastern hills. Golden light spilled across the estate. Across the ancient tree. Across the old envelope resting between father and son. Neither of them noticed. Because for the first time in 22 years, the past had finally found someone willing to listen. Chapter 2. The Promise. The piano continues softly. A lone cello joins beneath it. Traditional Korean strings enter almost imperceptibly. Morning has fully arrived, but the warmth of daylight cannot soften the weight of what is about to be revealed. There are promises. Made in celebration. Made in hope. Made in love. And then there are promises made because someone believes they may never return. Those promises become heavier with every passing year. Chairman Kang had carried one for 22. Neither father nor son moved. The envelope rested quietly in Ji-hoon's hands. It was remarkably ordinary. Cream paper. Black ink. A faint crease across one corner. Nothing about it suggested it had survived more than 2 decades of silence. Yet Ji-hoon found himself holding it as carefully as though it might fall apart if he breathed too deeply. His father finally spoke. I received that letter the night before Seo Min-jae disappeared. Ji-hoon looked up. He came here. Chairman Kong nodded once. Very late. He refused to come inside. The chairman's eyes drifted toward the estate gates, as though he could still see that rainy evening. He stood exactly where you're standing now, soaked from the rain, exhausted, but strangely calm. He said there were people watching him. He believed he was running out of time. Ji-hoon listened without interrupting. The way his father told stories. Every pause mattered. He handed me the envelope. He smiled. And then he said something I've never forgotten. The chairman closed his eyes briefly. If I don't come back, please don't let my daughter grow up believing I abandoned her. Ji-hoon felt something tighten inside his chest. His thoughts immediately found Debbie. Something tighten inside his chest. The woman who still smiled when she spoke about ordinary things. The woman who carried grief so gracefully that most people never noticed it. He knew he had a daughter? Ji-hoon asked quietly. He adored her. The chairman answered immediately. She was barely 7 years old. He carried her photograph in his wallet. He showed it to me 3 times during that conversation. The same photograph. Every single time. He wasn't afraid for himself. The chairman's voice became softer. He was afraid she'd grow up wondering why her father never came home. The morning breeze stirred the branches above them. Several persimmons fell softly into the grass. Neither man looked away. Ji-hoon lowered his eyes toward the envelope. Why didn't you tell anyone? His father remained silent for a long while. When he finally answered, his voice sounded older than Ji-hoon had ever heard. Because I gave him my word. He asked me to protect his family. He asked me to protect something much larger than Kong Holdings. And I believed. I still had time. Ji-hoon frowned. Time for what? The chairman smiled sadly. To fix what happened. Another silence. Finally, Ji-hoon asked the question that had haunted him since opening the file. What exactly happened 22 years ago? The chairman looked toward the koi pond. I don't know. Ji-hoon's eyebrows rose. You don't. I know pieces. I know consequences. I know who disappeared. I know who lied. He turned slowly toward his son. But I don't know who gave the order. Those words landed harder than Ji-hoon expected. Someone had orchestrated everything. Government files erased. Archive records removed. Entire years missing. A family left waiting. Someone powerful. Ji-hoon looked back at the envelope. May I read it now? The chairman hesitated. Long enough for Ji-hoon to realize the answer frightened him. No. Not because I don't trust you. Because you're missing the beginning. He stepped closer, lowering his voice almost to a whisper. There is one person alive. Who knows what happened before Seo Min-jae came here? Ji-hoon's heart quickened. Who? The chairman's answer came almost gently. Mr. Choi, the owner of Moon Bean Café. Ji-hoon stared. The cafe owner? The chairman nodded. He wasn't always a cafe owner. He was Min-jae's closest friend. The world seemed to stop again. The quiet man who remembered everyone's coffee order. Who smiled at strangers. Who spoke in gentle riddles. Had been standing beside the truth all along. The chairman placed one hand lightly on Ji-hoon's shoulder. When you're ready, read the letter. But first, go have coffee. Ji-hoon looked confused. His father smiled. The smallest smile. Almost invisible. Sometimes, the people who carry answers will only give them to someone they've learned to trust. The chairman turned and slowly walked back toward the estate, leaving Ji-hoon alone beneath the ancient persimmon tree. The envelope remained in his hands. Its paper fluttered gently in the morning breeze. Across Gangnam, Moon Bean Café was opening for another ordinary day. Mr. Choi unlocked the front door, switched on the lights, placed fresh pastries inside the display case. Then, without realizing why, he paused, looked toward the familiar crosswalk, and quietly whispered, Good morning, Min-jae. Some promises survive because they are written on paper. Others, because someone refuses to forget. Chapter 3. The Ordinary Thursday. Warm jazz piano blends gently with soft reggae guitar. The cello recedes, replaced by the comfortable rhythm of a city settling into another workday. Outside, Seoul is bright beneath crisp autumn skies. The extraordinary rarely announces itself. It hides inside ordinary Thursdays, inside routine, inside familiar streets, inside people who have absolutely no idea that their lives are quietly changing. Debbie Seo believed this Thursday would belong to deadlines, emails, coffee, and far too many meetings. She could not have been more wrong. Brightline Creative buzzed with its usual energy. Designers debated colors with surprising intensity. Copywriters stared at blinking cursors. Somewhere in the building, someone argued passionately that typography had feelings. No one questioned the statement. Creative agencies accepted strange conversations as part of daily life. Debbie stepped through the glass doors carrying 2 coffees. One for herself. One for Hannah. She smiled at the receptionist. Morning. Morning, Debbie. Big day? Aren't they all? The receptionist laughed. Fair point. Hannah spotted her immediately. There she is. She hurried across the office dramatically. I was beginning to think Kang Holdings hired you overnight. Debbie nearly spilled her coffee laughing. They've barely met me. They looked interested. They looked polite. There's a difference. Hannah raised one eyebrow. There wasn't much difference yesterday. Debbie rolled her eyes. You are impossible. I've been told. Frequently. They reached Debbie's desk. Mood boards covered nearly every surface. Photographs. color swatches, handwritten notes, magazine clippings. At the center, 3 words remained pinned to the board. People before profit. Debbie studied them quietly. Daniel had insisted they stay. For the first time in her career, someone had trusted her instincts completely. The thought was both exciting and terrifying. Daniel Cho appeared carrying a folder beneath one arm. "You've already started." Debbie looked up. "I couldn't stop thinking." Daniel smiled. The best campaigns usually begin that way. He placed the folder beside her. "Kong Holdings." She opened it. Inside were additional research requests, factory visits, employee interviews, executive profiles, community outreach programs. Debbie's eyes widened. "They approved all this?" Daniel nodded. "They don't want advertising. They want honesty." Across the office, Hannah whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I told you she was going to become famous." Debbie didn't even look up. "If you keep saying that, I'm charging you royalties." Laughter rippled across the creative floor. For a moment, everything felt wonderfully normal. Yet, something else occupied Debbie's thoughts. Not deadlines. Not presentations. Not Kong Holdings. A smile. A quiet laugh beside a boardroom window. A man who had made coffee with his own hands. She caught herself drifting. Immediately shook her head. "No," she whispered. "We are working today." Hannah glanced over. "Talking to yourself again?" "I'm negotiating." "Winning?" "Not even close." The office phone rang. Daniel answered. Listened. Then looked toward Debbie. "They'd like the first concept review tomorrow morning." The room erupted into motion. People grabbed notebooks. Design files opened. Someone shouted for fresh coffee. Another printer began protesting dramatically. Debbie smiled. Chaos. She loved it. Because beneath the deadlines, people created things together. And that had always felt a little magical. Across Gangnam, Moon Bean Café welcomed another steady stream of customers. Mr. Choi moved quietly behind the espresso machine, grinding beans, steaming milk, remembering names. Nothing unusual. At least, that was how it appeared. Because beneath the register, hidden inside an old wooden drawer, rested an envelope. Cream-colored. Simple. Addressed in familiar handwriting. For Debbie. He had looked at it twice already. Resisted opening it twice. He would resist a third time. The bell above the cafe door chimed. Ding. Mr. Kim entered. The usual? Mr. Choi asked. You already know. I usually do. As he prepared the latte, Mr. Kim noticed Mr. Choi seemed distracted. You seem quieter today. Mr. Choi smiled gently. Some mornings ask more questions than others. Mr. Kim laughed. You really missed your calling. I own a cafe. People think that makes me wise. Mr. Kim accepted his coffee. But are you? Mr. Choi looked toward the drawer beneath the register. His smile faded almost imperceptibly. No, he answered softly. I'm simply old enough to know that every answer arrives carrying another question. Just before noon, the cafe door opened again. Debbie stepped inside. Notebook tucked beneath one arm. Hair slightly windblown. Smile exactly where it belonged. There you are, Mr. Choi said warmly. You sound relieved. I am. You've been working too hard. She laughed. Has the whole city decided to monitor my life? It saves time. Without asking. He placed her usual vanilla latte on the counter. Extra foam. Exactly the way she liked it. She settled into her favorite seat beside the window. The same seat. The same crosswalk. The same view. Only, it no longer felt quite the same. She watched strangers crossing the street. Cars gliding through the intersection. A courier balancing far too many packages. Everything looked ordinary. Yet every time she glanced toward the crosswalk, she remembered polished shoes, a ruined Italian suit, and a man who had somehow turned embarrassment into laughter. She smiled despite herself, then opened her notebook. Slowly, she wrote. Some meetings last only minutes, yet somehow continue long after goodbye. She stared at the sentence. Read it again. Then quietly laughed. I'm getting worse. Across the cafe, Mr. Choi noticed her smile. He didn't read her notebook. He never would. Some pages deserved privacy. But he understood enough. Hope had returned to her writing. And hope was always worth protecting. As the afternoon sun poured through the cafe windows, Mr. Choi rested one hand on the drawer beneath the register. The envelope remained hidden, waiting, just as it had waited, for 22 years. Chapter 4. The Founder. A slow piano returns. Traditional Korean strings weave gently beneath it. The atmosphere becomes reflective, carrying the quiet dignity of history rather than the urgency of mystery. There are photographs that capture a moment. Then there are photographs that quietly preserve an entire lifetime. The difference is rarely obvious until many years later. Kang Holdings archives occupied the oldest wing of the headquarters. Few employees ever visited. Fewer still knew it existed. Hidden beneath polished executive offices, the archive preserved nearly 70 years of company history. Annual reports, architectural blueprints, factory ledgers, personal journals, letters, photographs. The story of a company, told one document at a time. Ji-hoon stepped inside. The scent greeted him first. Old paper, leather bindings, polished cedar shelves. History had a smell. He had always thought it smelled like patience. Chief Archivist Han bowed respectfully. Good morning, Executive Director. Good morning. I believe you've found something. The archivist nodded. I think we've found several things. He led Ji-hoon through endless rows of shelves. Thousands of carefully labeled boxes rested in perfect order. Nothing here happened by accident. Every document had survived because someone believed it deserved remembering. They stopped before a small wooden table. Several archive boxes waited there. Already opened. Already organized. The archivist carefully slipped on a pair of white cotton gloves, then handed another pair to Ji-hoon. These photographs are irreplaceable. Ji-hoon nodded. So are some memories. The archivist opened the first box. Inside, hundreds of black and white photographs, groundbreaking ceremonies, factory openings, scholarship presentations, company picnics. Nothing unusual. Until one photograph caught Ji-hoon's attention. Founder Kang Song-cheol stood outside the original Kang Holdings factory. He looked much younger than Ji-hoon had ever seen him. Beside him stood another man. Mid-30s. Calm eyes. Straight posture. Wearing an ordinary dark suit. Not smiling. Not frowning. Simply watching the camera. Seo Min-jae. Ji-hoon stared at the image. They knew each other. The archivist answered quietly. Better than most people realized. Ji-hoon turned the photograph over. Blue ink. Neat handwriting. Only 2 words. Trust him. No signature. No explanation. Another photograph. Founder Kang shaking hands with Seo Min-jae beside a government vehicle. Another. Both men laughing over cups of coffee outside what appeared to be a roadside restaurant. Another. Seo Min-jae standing beside Chairman Kang's late mother during a company charity event. Ji-hoon's breathing slowed. This wasn't business. No. The archivist agreed. It looked like friendship. He opened another archive box. This one contained newspaper clippings, awards, public announcements, government recognitions. Then, large empty spaces, entire folders missing, cardboard dividers labeled with dates, containing nothing. Ji-hoon looked up. What happened here? The archivist hesitated. I've worked in these archives for 28 years. Those folders were already gone when I arrived. Were they destroyed? No. They were signed out. By whom? The archivist lowered his voice. That's the strange part. There are no signatures. Silence settled over the archive room. Only the quiet hum of climate control disturbed the stillness. Someone had removed pieces of history without leaving footprints. Ji-hoon returned to the first photograph. Founder Kong, Seo Min-jae, standing side by side. Neither looked important. Neither looked powerful. They simply looked like two men who trusted one another. Who are you? Ji-hoon whispered. This time, he wasn't speaking only to Seo Min-jae. He was speaking to his grandfather as well. Across Gangnam, Debbie and Hannah walked toward a small street cafe after work. The afternoon sun painted long shadows across the sidewalks. Hannah carried 2 iced teas. I have a theory. Debbie laughed. Should I be worried? Always. Hannah handed her a drink. I think Vice Chairman Kong likes you. Debbie nearly inhaled her tea. What? I've watched enough Korean dramas. This is how they start. Debbie shook her head. This isn't a drama. No, you spilled coffee on him. Twice. He smiled. He asked for another meeting. And now your company lands the biggest account of the year. Hannah grinned. If this isn't a drama, I'd like a refund. Debbie laughed until tears formed in her eyes. Then quietly said, I don't think it's him. Hannah blinked. What do you mean? Debbie looked toward the evening sky. I think. She searched for the words. Life just feels different lately. At that exact moment, inside Kong Holdings, Ji-hoon slid the photograph into a protective sleeve. Not because company policy required it, because it suddenly felt personal. Very personal. His assistant entered quietly. Sir, the chairman is asking whether you found what you were looking for. Ji-hoon looked once more at the photograph, then answered honestly. No. He paused. I've only discovered. How much I still don't know. The archivist watched him leave, then looked back toward the empty spaces on the shelves. Softly, almost to himself, he whispered, History never disappears. It simply waits for someone brave enough to look. 1 photograph. 2 friends. 22 years of silence. The truth had not been erased, only scattered, like pieces of a puzzle hidden across an entire lifetime. And somewhere, someone had begun putting those pieces back together. Chapter 5. Threads tighten. A mellow piano is joined by a low cello and a distant Korean bamboo flute. Outside, the evening rush hums across Gangnam. Inside Moon Bean Café, time seems to move more slowly. Cities remember. Not with monuments. Not with museums. But through the people who refuse to leave them. The people who quietly witness decades pass from behind familiar counters. Beside familiar windows. At familiar tables. Moon Bean Café had become one of those places. Long before its customers realized it. The evening crowd had thinned. Office workers hurried towards subway stations. Students packed away textbooks. The aroma of roasted coffee lingered in the warm air. Mr. Choi wiped the espresso machine with the same care he had shown every evening for nearly 25 years. Routine was comforting, especially when the past refused to remain where it belonged. The bell above the door chimed. Not loudly, just enough. Mr. Choi looked up. His hands stopped moving. Chairman Kang stood quietly inside the doorway. No security. No assistants. No expensive entourage. Just an elderly man wearing a dark overcoat and carrying the weight of many years. Neither man spoke immediately. Some friendships had earned the right to begin with silence. Finally, Mr. Choi smiled. It has been too long. Chairman Kong returned the smile. Far too long. Mr. Choi pointed toward the corner table beside the window. The usual seat? The chairman nodded. I don't believe we've ever sat anywhere else. 2 cups of coffee arrived without either man ordering. 1 black. 1 with a splash of cream. Neither recipe had changed in 22 years. For several minutes, they simply watched people pass outside. The city had grown taller, busier, faster. But from this corner of the cafe, it still felt possible to believe that time could pause. Mr. Choi broke the silence. You gave him the letter. It wasn't a question. Chairman Kong nodded. I did. And? My son knows the name. Mr. Choi lowered his eyes. Then the waiting has finally ended. The chairman gently turned his coffee cup between his hands. I wonder if we waited too long. Mr. Choi answered without hesitation. No. If we'd spoken sooner, she might never have survived it. Outside, a city bus rolled past the cafe. Its reflection drifted across the window like a passing memory. Chairman Kong sighed. I watched that little girl grow up from a distance. Mr. Choi remained quiet. I wanted to tell her. So many times. His voice became almost inaudible. But promises have consequences. Mr. Choi looked toward the register, toward the hidden drawer, toward the second envelope. I still have mine. The chairman's eyes lifted slowly. You never opened it? Mr. Choi shook his head. He told me. Only if she comes looking. The words lingered between them. Heavy. Sacred. Chairman Kong whispered. And if she never asks? Mr. Choi smiled sadly. Then she deserves the peace of never knowing. The chairman leaned back. I used to believe that. He looked out toward the crosswalk. Then softly added, I don't anymore. At that exact moment, the familiar pedestrian signal changed. Green. People crossed in every direction. Businessmen, students, parents, tourists. For just an instant, both men remembered another rainy afternoon. Coffee spilled across polished shoes. A young woman apologizing far too much. A young executive laughing when he should have been annoyed. Mr. Choi chuckled. You planned that. The chairman blinked. What? You sent Ji-hoon here. I suggested coffee. You suggested this cafe. For the first time that evening, Chairman Kong laughed. A genuine laugh. Small. Warm. Unexpected. I may have hoped. Mr. Choi smiled knowingly. You always were a terrible matchmaker. I wasn't trying to make a match. No, I was trying to see whether kindness still recognized kindness. Mr. Choi looked toward the empty chair where Debbie usually sat. It did. Silence returned. Comfortable this time. Not burdened. Not fearful. Simply shared. After several minutes, Chairman Kang reached inside his coat. He removed the old photograph Ji-hoon had discovered earlier. Founder Kong Song-cheol. Seo Min-jae. Standing shoulder to shoulder. Mr. Choi stared at it for a long time. His fingers trembled ever so slightly. I haven't seen this picture since before Min-jae disappeared. He trusted my grandfather. He trusted all of us. Mr. Choi's voice cracked for the first time. And we couldn't save him. The chairman answered quietly. No. But perhaps. He looked toward the hidden envelope beneath the register. We can still keep our promise to his daughter. Mr. Choi followed his gaze. His hand instinctively rested on the wooden drawer. He did not open it. Not yet. Instead, he whispered almost to himself. Soon, as Chairman Kong rose to leave, he paused beside the cafe door. Without turning around, he said, "She's stronger than we imagined." Mr. Choi smiled. "She has her father's courage." He paused. "And her mother's heart." The bell chimed once more as Chairman Kang stepped into the cool Seoul evening. Inside the cafe, Mr. Choi remained standing behind the counter, one hand resting on the old drawer, the other wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee. For 22 years, he had guarded an envelope. Tonight, envelope. For the first time, he wondered if it was finally time to let it go. Chapter 6. He had guarded an envelope. Tonight, envelope. For the first time, he wondered if it was finally time to let it go. Chapter 6. If I do not return. A single piano note echoes into silence. A mournful cello answers. Outside, rain begins to fall against the windows of Kang Holdings headquarters. It is not a storm. It is a quiet rain, the kind that invites memories to speak. Some letters carry information. Others carry a person's final heartbeat. The difference is impossible to recognize until the envelope is opened. The executive office overlooking Gangnam had emptied hours earlier. Lights across the city shimmered through the rain-speckled glass. Traffic flowed below like glowing rivers. Inside, only one lamp remained lit. Ji-hoon sat alone. The cream-colored envelope rested on his desk. For nearly an hour, he had simply looked at it. Not because he feared the truth. Because he feared there would be no way to unread it. He carefully broke the brittle seal. The paper protested softly. 22 years of silence unfolded with it. Inside rested 3 handwritten pages. The ink had faded slightly, but the handwriting remained steady. Deliberate. Patient. Almost comforting. Ji-hoon took a slow breath and began to read. If I do not return. To the man I trust more than myself. If these pages have reached your hands, then the road I chose has ended where I always feared it might. Do not waste your time searching for me. If I am alive, I will find my way home. If I am gone, no road you travel will bring me back. Ji-hoon paused. His fingers tightened around the paper. There was no bitterness. No panic. Only acceptance. As though Seo Min-jae had already made peace with whatever awaited him. He continued. There is something more important than my life. Her name is Debbie. She laughs with her whole heart. She believes butterflies follow people because they are happy. She still insists pancakes taste better when they are shaped like stars. Please, never allow her to believe I stopped loving her. Ji-hoon lowered the page. His throat tightened. For a brief moment, he didn't see handwriting. He saw a father. A father trying desperately to remain present in a future he feared he would never see. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. Almost like fingertips. He turned to the second page. I know what they have discovered. I know why they are coming. The documents must never reach the wrong hands. Too many families would disappear. Too many innocent people would suffer. Some truths protect the world. Others destroy it. The difference depends entirely on who is holding them. Ji-hoon's heartbeat quickened. Documents. Not money. Not corporate secrets. Not revenge. Documents. He whispered to himself. What were you protecting? The answer did not come. Not yet. Instead, the letter continued. If the day ever comes when Debbie asks who I truly was, tell her this before anything else. I was never brave because I wasn't afraid. I was brave because she deserved to grow up in a kinder world than the one chasing me. Ji-hoon closed his eyes. The room had grown impossibly quiet. He suddenly understood why Chairman Kang had carried this letter for so long. Some burdens, were impossible to hand to another person. He unfolded the final page. Unlike the others, this one contained only a few paragraphs, written more quickly, as though time had become very short. Chairman Kong, there is one more promise I must ask of you. If fate is kinder than I deserve, one day my daughter will meet someone whose heart reminds her that goodness still exists. When that day comes, do not protect her from the truth any longer. Protect her while she learns it. Ji-hoon stopped breathing. The words echoed through him. Not because they predicted him. They didn't. They simply described the kind of person Debbie would one day need. Someone steady. Someone kind. Someone who would remain beside her when the past finally arrived. At the very bottom of the page, below the signature, another sentence appeared, smaller than the rest, almost as though Min-jae had added it after folding the letter. Tell Mr. Choi. The coffee was never really about coffee. Ji-hoon frowned. He read the line again, then a third time. It made no sense. Yet somehow, it felt important. A soft knock came at the office door. His assistant stepped inside. I'm sorry to interrupt, sir. Ji-hoon carefully folded the letter. What is it? The security desk called. They said someone left a package downstairs. For me? Yes. There was no return address. Minutes later, Ji-hoon stood alone in the lobby. A small wooden box waited on the reception counter. No labels. No company logo. Only a single piece of folded paper. In careful handwriting. For words. For the son who listened. Ji-hoon looked toward the rain beyond the glass doors. The city stretched endlessly before him. Somewhere beyond those lights, Debbie laughed with friends, completely unaware that her father's voice had just crossed 22 years to find its first listener. And somewhere else, someone knew the letter had finally been opened. A promise had been kept. A letter had been read. But the mystery had only deepened. Because the greatest revelation was not what Seo Min-jae had written. It was what he had deliberately left unsaid. Chapter 7. The Wooden Box. The rain fades. A slow piano melody returns, joined by the deep resonance of a Korean gaegeum. The city outside glows beneath wet streets reflecting thousands of lights. Tonight, Seoul feels as though it is listening. Every family has a box, a drawer, a forgotten shelf. Some small place where objects survive longer than memories. A watch that no longer ticks. A photograph whose faces have faded. A key that no one remembers using. Most people inherit these things without asking why. Few discover that history sometimes hides inside the smallest containers. Ji-hoon carried the wooden box back to his office. It was no larger than a hardbound book. Dark walnut. Handcrafted. Its corners had been worn smooth by careful hands. There was no lock. Only a brass clasp polished by time. He turned it over. Nothing. No company seal. No initials. No return address. Only silence. He released the clasp. The lid opened with a soft creak. Inside, everything had been arranged with extraordinary care. Not valuables. Not money. Not jewelry. Memories. The first object was a silver fountain pen. Its cap was engraved with 2 Korean characters.
Min-jae.
Min-jae. Beneath it rested an old wristwatch. The leather strap had cracked with age. Its hands had stopped forever at 8:17. Ji-hoon stared at the frozen time. Accidents rarely stopped watches. Violence often did. There was also a faded subway ticket. A pressed cherry blossom sealed between 2 thin sheets of paper. A child's yellow hair ribbon. And finally, a small cassette tape. Its handwritten label read, Spring Festival. Ji-hoon lifted it carefully. He smiled faintly. He hadn't seen a cassette in years. At the bottom of the box, Folded beneath a piece of linen lay another envelope. Unlike the first, this one was addressed to Kang Ji-hoon. His heart skipped. How could Seo Min-jae have known his name? He couldn't have. Not 22 years ago. Ji-hoon opened it anyway. Inside was a single page. The handwriting was different. More recent. If you are reading this, then Chairman Kang has finally trusted you. Everything inside this box belonged to Min-jae. He left it with me because he believed someone honest would one day need to understand the man behind the mystery. Do not look for a hero. Look for a father. Mr. Choi. Ji-hoon lowered the page. He suddenly realized. Mr. Choi had been carrying far more than an envelope. He had been carrying a life. Across Gangnam, Moon Bean Café prepared to close. The final customer waved goodbye. The lights were dimmed. Chairs were turned upside down onto tables. The familiar routines unfolded as they always had. Until Mr. Choi unlocked the drawer beneath the register. The cream-colored envelope rested exactly where it always had. Waiting. Patient. Faithful. 22 years. He picked it up. Ran his thumb gently across Debbie's name. His eyes glistened. I promised. He whispered. I kept my promise. He looked toward the empty cafe. Toward Debbie's favorite window seat. Toward the rain-streaked glass. But perhaps, keeping it forever was never the promise. A quiet knock interrupted his thoughts. He looked toward the door. Debbie stood outside, umbrella in one hand. A sheepish smile on her face. I'm sorry. She laughed. I think I left my notebook. Mr. Choi smiled warmly. You did. He walked to her favorite table. The notebook still rested exactly where she'd forgotten it. She accepted it gratefully. I'd lose my head if it wasn't attached. You're carrying many thoughts these days. I guess I am. She hesitated. Neither of them seemed ready to end the conversation. Finally, Debbie smiled. Can I ask you something? Of course. Were you friends with my father? Time stopped. Not dramatically. Quietly. Like a candle whose flame suddenly stood perfectly still. Mr. Choi looked into her eyes. He saw the same curiosity, the same kindness, the same quiet courage that he had once seen in Seo Min-jae. He smiled gently. Yes. Debbie blinked. You knew him? I did. Her voice softened. What was he like? Mr. Choi didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked behind the counter, picked up the envelope, held it for a long moment, then returned. He placed it on the table between them. Debbie looked down. Her own name, written in handwriting she had never seen. Her fingers trembled. What is this? Mr. Choi's smile carried both sorrow and relief. It's something your father asked me to give you. Rain whispered against the cafe windows. The city outside continued as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Cars passed. People hurried home. Neon signs shimmered across wet pavement. Inside Moon Bean Café, a daughter stared at her own name, written by the father she had spent 22 years wondering about. She reached toward the envelope, then stopped, looked back at Mr. Choi, almost afraid to breathe. Will everything change if I open it? Mr. Choi answered with complete honesty. Yes. He paused. But I believe it will finally begin making sense. Some journeys begin with a single step. Others begin with a single unopened letter. Tonight, envelope. Debbie Seo stood at the edge of both. Chapter 8. A daughter's letter. The cafe is almost silent. A lone piano carries the melody while soft strings rise beneath it. Rain has eased into a gentle drizzle. Every sound seems to wait for the next heartbeat. There are words a child spends an entire lifetime hoping to hear. Some arrive too late. Some never arrive at all. And sometimes, they survive inside an envelope, waiting patiently for the day they are finally needed. Debbie looked at her name. Not printed. Not typed. Written. Every curve of every letter carried the tiny imperfections of a human hand. A hand she could no longer remember. Yet somehow, it felt familiar. Her fingers hovered over the envelope, then withdrew. She laughed nervously. I suddenly don't know how to open a letter. Mr. Choi smiled gently. There is no correct way. She looked toward the rain-streaked window. When I was little, my mother used to tell me that my father wrote beautiful birthday cards. She swallowed. I don't remember them. Mr. Choi's eyes softened. He always rewrote them. What? He worried the first version wasn't good enough. Debbie smiled through gathering tears. That sounds exhausting. Mr. Choi chuckled. It was. He believed words mattered. She looked back at the envelope. So do I. Carefully. She slipped one finger beneath the seal. The paper gave way with the faintest whisper. 22 years. Reduced to a single sound. Inside, only 2 sheets of paper, folded neatly, and a photograph. The photograph came first. A little girl sat on a wooden fence beneath a breadfruit tree. She wore denim overalls, one shoelace untied. A gap-toothed smile stretched across her face as she held up a tiny frog with enormous pride. Behind her, a young Korean man laughed so hard he wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking only at her. Debbie's breathing stopped. Dad. It wasn't a question. It wasn't uncertainty. For the first time in her life, she was seeing him. Not through stories. Not through faded memories. Not through imagination. Through love. A tear slipped onto the photograph. She wiped it away immediately. I'm sorry, she whispered, as though apologizing to the picture itself. Mr. Choi quietly looked away. Some moments deserved privacy, even when shared. Debbie unfolded the first page. The handwriting matched the name on the envelope. Steady, gentle, patient. My little firefly. If this letter has reached you, then you are old enough to understand something I prayed you would never have to learn. The first thing you must know is this. I did not leave because I stopped loving you. I left because loving you was the only thing that made leaving impossible. Debbie pressed one hand against her mouth. A quiet sob escaped before she could stop it. She continued reading. Do you remember chasing butterflies beside Grandma's breadfruit tree? You insisted every butterfly had somewhere important to be. When I asked where, you answered, home. I have carried that answer with me every day. A tiny laugh escaped through her tears. I remember, she whispered. I actually remember. Another memory surfaced. Warm sunlight. Red dirt beneath bare feet. Her father's hand holding hers. A yellow butterfly refusing to land. A voice laughing beside her. One she had believed was gone forever. She read on. Your mother is the strongest person I have ever known. If she ever becomes angry with me, let her. She has earned that right. Never ask her to forgive me. Simply love her enough that one day she forgives herself. Debbie lowered the page. Confusion crossed her face. Forgive herself? Mr. Choi quietly answered. Your father never blamed your mother. He never wanted you to either. Debbie nodded slowly. The years of unanswered questions suddenly seemed far more complicated than she had imagined. She turned to the second page. The handwriting became slightly less steady, as though exhaustion had found its way into the ink. There is something I cannot explain. Not because I do not trust you, because explaining it would place others in danger. One day, someone kinder than I am will tell you the rest. Trust them. Debbie frowned. What does that mean? Mr. Choi remained silent. Not because he didn't know, because it still wasn't his story to finish. She continued. Until then, live completely. Laugh loudly. Forgive often. Choose kindness even when the world chooses fear. If you ever wonder whether I was proud of you, the answer arrived before the question. Every single day. Her vision blurred completely. The final lines almost disappeared behind tears. You once asked me, Daddy, will you always find me? My answer has never changed. Always. No matter how long it takes. Love. Dad. Silence filled the cafe. Not empty silence. Sacred silence. The kind that arrives after a heart has been carrying too much for too long. Debbie folded the letter carefully. Not because she wanted to put it away. Because she wanted to protect it. Just as someone else had done for 22 years. She looked at Mr. Choi. So, her voice trembled. My father really loved me. Mr. Choi smiled through tears of his own. There was never a single day when he didn't. Debbie closed her eyes. For years, she had believed the hardest question was, why didn't he come back? Tonight, envelope. She discovered the harder question. What happened to keep him away? Outside, the rain finally stopped. Moonlight slipped through the clouds. For the first time that evening, the streets of Gangnam reflected stars instead of storm clouds. Far above the city, Ji-hoon stood in his office looking out over the skyline. His phone vibrated. A single message. From Mr. Choi. She knows he loved her. Ji-hoon read it twice. Then looked toward the lights stretching across Seoul. Quietly, almost like a promise to himself, he said, now we'll help her learn the rest. A daughter had finally heard her father's voice. Not in person. Not in memory. But through words that had refused to surrender to time. Yet the greatest mystery remained untouched. Who was Seo Min-jae protecting? And why had so many powerful people spent 22 years making sure no one ever learned the answer? Those questions would carry them into the next chapter of their lives. Chapter 9. Shadows in the Archive. The warmth of the previous chapter slowly gives way to a low, suspenseful pulse beneath the piano. Rain has stopped, but the city feels changed. Somewhere in Seoul, someone has realized the past is beginning to wake. Truth has an unusual habit. The moment one person begins searching for it, someone else begins trying to bury it. Thursday became Friday. Long before sunrise. Most of Seoul still slept. Apartment windows remained dark. The Han River reflected only scattered lights from the bridges stretching across its quiet waters. But inside Kong Holdings, one office remained illuminated. Ji-hoon hadn't gone home. The wooden box still rested on the corner of his desk. Seo Min-jae's fountain pen. The broken watch. The faded photograph. The cassette tape. Each object raised another question. None answered the first. He picked up the watch once more. 8. 17. The hands refused to move. He turned it over. This time, something caught his eye. Tiny lettering engraved into the steel back. Almost invisible. KSC. Ji-hoon's eyes narrowed. Not Min-jae's initials. His grandfather's. Kang Song-cheol. Why would his grandfather's initials be engraved on Min-jae's watch? His office phone rang. Chief Archivist Han. Director Kang. The archivist sounded uneasy. I think you should come downstairs. What happened? I'd rather show you. 20 minutes later. Ji-hoon stepped back into the archive. Something immediately felt wrong. Shelves that had stood untouched for decades were no longer perfectly aligned. One cabinet door remained slightly open. Chief Han stood beside it. His usually calm expression had vanished. I locked everything before I left. He spoke quietly. I always do. Ji-hoon looked inside the cabinet. Empty. Which files? The founder's private correspondence. How many? All of them. Silence settled over the archive. Not confusion. Recognition. Someone wasn't cleaning history. Someone was chasing it. Chief Han handed Ji-hoon a small evidence envelope. I found this on the floor. Inside, a single photograph. Bent at one corner. Apparently dropped in haste. Ji-hoon removed it carefully. His breath caught. Founder Kong. Seo Min-jae. Mr. Choi. And a fourth man. Unknown. Standing slightly behind them. Unlike the others. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking directly at Seo Min-jae. On the back. Only one sentence. Spring Festival 1998. Ji-hoon's thoughts raced. The cassette tape. Same words. Same year. This wasn't coincidence. Chief Han leaned closer. I've worked here nearly 30 years. I've never seen that man before. Ji-hoon studied the stranger. Tall. Neatly dressed. Perhaps 40 years old. No company badge. No government insignia. Nothing identifying him. Yet, his face carried something unsettling. Not anger. Calculation. As though he'd already decided how the story would end. Across Gangnam, Moon Bean Café opened for another morning. Debbie arrived earlier than usual. She carried her father's letter tucked safely inside her notebook. She hadn't slept. Not because of sadness. Because every sentence had awakened another memory. Tiny fragments. A laugh. A scent. A melody she couldn't quite remember. Mr. Choi placed a warm cup of coffee before her. No vanilla today. She looked surprised. You remembered? He smiled. I remembered something else. He disappeared briefly into the kitchen, returning with a small plate. Pancakes. Cut carefully into the shape of stars. Debbie stared, then looked at him. My father. Mr. Choi nodded. He used to make them every Saturday. A tear escaped before she could stop it. She laughed at herself. I'm crying over pancakes. No. Mr. Choi answered gently. You're remembering home. At that exact moment, the cafe television quietly switched from the morning news to a business report. The announcer smiled. Kong Holdings announced today that Executive Director Kang Ji-hoon will oversee a comprehensive review of the company's historical archives as part of its upcoming 70th anniversary celebration. Debbie looked toward the screen. Ji-hoon's photograph appeared briefly. Professional. Composed. Calm. Yet somehow. She smiled. Without realizing she was smiling. Mr. Choi noticed. He said nothing. Some things needed room to grow. Across the city. Inside a black luxury sedan parked 3 blocks from Kang Holdings. Someone else watched the same news report. The television reflected faintly in the tinted window. A gloved hand slowly switched it off. A voice spoke from the darkness. So, he finally opened the letter. Another voice answered calmly. It appears so. The first voice remained silent for several moments, then quietly gave an order. Find the girl. The engine started. The sedan pulled smoothly into the morning traffic, disappearing among thousands of ordinary commuters. Invisible. Patient. Waiting. For 22 years. The truth had slept. Now, it had begun to breathe again. And somewhere in Seoul, someone who had spent decades hiding from the past had just realized the past was coming for them. Chapter 10. The Man in the Photograph. A steady piano motif intertwines with a restrained orchestral pulse. The warmth of the previous chapter gives way to quiet tension. Somewhere beyond the glass towers of Gangnam, old secrets have begun moving once again. Every photograph tells 2 stories. The first, is the one everyone notices. The second belongs to the person standing just outside the center. The one nobody thought to watch. Until it was too late. Ji-hoon placed the Spring Festival photograph beneath a high-resolution scanner. The archive laboratory had changed very little since it was built. Unlike the executive floors upstairs, this room valued precision over appearance. Microscopes, archival lights, digital restoration equipment, machines designed to help forgotten details speak again. Chief Archivist Han adjusted the scanner. The original negatives are long gone. But sometimes, he smiled faintly. Paper remembers more than our eyes. The machine hummed softly. The image appeared on a large monitor. At first, nothing seemed different. Founder Kong, Seo Min-jae, Mr. Choi, the unidentified fourth man. Then, Chief Han enlarged the stranger's wrist. A silver badge hung partially beneath his jacket sleeve. Almost completely hidden. Almost. Ji-hoon leaned closer. The image sharpened. The symbol became visible. Not a company logo. Not military. Not police. A phoenix. Encircled by 4 laurel branches. Chief Han frowned. I've seen that somewhere. Minutes later, 3 thick reference books lay open across the table. Government agencies. Historical organizations. Corporate partnerships. Nothing matched. Until the oldest book. Published nearly 30 years earlier. Chief Han stopped turning pages. There. Ji-hoon looked down. A grainy black and white illustration. The same phoenix. The same circle. National Cultural Heritage Preservation Bureau. A government agency. One that officially ceased to exist. 21 years ago. Ji-hoon's eyebrows narrowed. Why would a cultural preservation officer be standing with my grandfather? Chief Han quietly corrected him. He isn't standing with your grandfather. Ji-hoon looked again. The stranger wasn't facing Founder Kong. He wasn't looking toward Mr. Choi. He was watching Seo Min-jae. Not casually. Professionally. Like surveillance. A chill settled across the room. Chief Han carefully closed the reference book. Director Kang. I don't believe this photograph captured a celebration. What do you think it captured? The moment someone began watching your father's friend. Ji-hoon remained silent. His thoughts raced back to the letter. They know what they have discovered. Perhaps Min-jae had not become a target overnight. Perhaps someone had been following him for years. Across the city, Debbie walked through Bukshan Hanok village with her camera. She had taken the afternoon away from the office. Daniel insisted. You've been carrying too much. He'd told her. Go find something beautiful. So she had. Old wooden homes. Stone pathways. Paper lanterns swaying gently beneath the summer breeze. Children laughing. Artists sketching beneath tiled rooftops. She stopped before a tiny bookstore. Inside, an elderly woman arranged worn second-hand books with remarkable care. Debbie wandered quietly through the shelves. Travel journals. Poetry. History. One title caught her attention. Letters Never Sent. She smiled. Perhaps life had developed an unusual sense of humor. As she reached for the book, another hand reached for it at exactly the same moment. I'm sorry. Both voices spoke together. Debbie laughed. You first. The elderly man smiled warmly. No. Ladies always win. He stepped back politely. His silver hair caught the afternoon sunlight. His clothes were simple. Nothing remarkable. Yet something about him felt strangely familiar. You like old letters? He asked. I think. Debbie answered thoughtfully. I'm only beginning to. The old man nodded. Sometimes. He said softly. Letters don't change the past. They simply introduce you to it. Debbie smiled. I'll remember that. So will I, he answered. He purchased nothing, simply bowed politely, then disappeared into the afternoon crowd. Debbie watched him leave. A peculiar feeling settled over her. Not fear. Recognition. Though she couldn't explain why. 3 blocks away, the elderly man entered a waiting sedan. The driver asked quietly, "Did she recognize you?" The man removed his glasses, looked back toward the bookstore. "No." "Good. But she has her father's eyes." The car disappeared into Seoul traffic. Back inside Kong Holdings, Chief Han handed Ji-hoon a thin personnel file. It took some searching. Across the top, one name, Director Lee Sung-woo, former National Cultural Heritage Preservation Bureau, declared deceased 20 years ago. Ji-hoon looked up slowly. "If he's dead," Chief Han answered before he finished. "Then someone has been pretending to be." Outside the archive window, the evening sky darkened. Not with rain, with a quiet certainty that someone still alive had spent 22 years hiding behind a dead man's name. History had offered another piece of the puzzle. Not enough to reveal the whole picture. Only enough to prove someone had carefully torn pieces away. And somewhere in Seoul, a man officially declared dead had just spoken to the daughter of the man he once watched, without either of them saying his name. Chapter 11. The Forgotten Recording. A faint crackle of vinyl blends into a nostalgic piano. A lone violin rises gently beneath it. The sound carries the feeling of memory itself, fragile but impossible to erase. Voices are remarkable things. A photograph preserves a face. A letter preserves a thought. But a voice preserves a living soul. Its laughter, its hesitation, its warmth, its humanity. And unlike photographs, a voice has the power to make the past feel only seconds away. Ji-hoon carefully lifted the cassette from the wooden box. The faded label read only 4 words. Spring Festival 1998. He turned it over. No company logo. No recording date. Just handwritten ink. Chief Archivist Han looked at the cassette with surprise. "I honestly didn't think anyone still owned one of these." Ji-hoon smiled faintly. "My grandfather never threw anything away." Han nodded thoughtfully. Then perhaps he never wanted this forgotten. After nearly an hour of searching, they found it. An old cassette player tucked inside a storage cabinet. Dust covered its surface. The power cord had yellowed with age. Han plugged it into the wall. Nothing. He frowned, tapped the side gently. Still nothing. Then, almost stubbornly, the machine clicked to life. Both men laughed quietly. Older machines, Han said, have a habit of surviving longer than expected. Ji-hoon slid the cassette into place. Pressed play. At first, only static. Soft hiss. The gentle imperfections of magnetic tape. Then, a woman's voice. Bright. Cheerful. "Everyone look over here." Laughter followed. Children running. Someone clapping. Music playing somewhere nearby. The unmistakable sounds of a community festival. Ji-hoon closed his eyes. He wasn't listening to evidence anymore. He was listening to someone's ordinary day. Another voice entered. Warm. Gentle. Playful. Firefly. Ji-hoon's eyes opened instantly. A little girl answered. Daddy. Debbie. She couldn't have been older than 7. Her laughter burst through the old speaker. Pure. Completely untouched by the years that followed. "Did you find another butterfly?" "I found 3. You promised only to catch them with your eyes." "I did. They landed by themselves." Adult laughter filled the recording. Chief Han quietly smiled. "I've never heard joy sound so alive." Then another familiar voice appeared. "Min-jae? Mr. Choi." Much younger. Energetic. Laughing. Your daughter negotiates better than you do. I've noticed. Min-jae laughed. She definitely inherited that from her mother. Ji-hoon listened in silence. This wasn't just proof. It was life. Simple. Beautiful. Completely ordinary. Exactly what had been stolen. Minutes passed. Festival music. Children. Conversations. The sound of plates being shared. Someone playing a traditional drum. Then, the mood shifted. A new voice entered. Firm. Professional. Director Lee is here. Ji-hoon and Han exchanged a glance. Director Lee. The recording continued. Footsteps. Chairs moving. The crowd grew more distant. As though the recorder had been carried away from the celebration. Min-jae spoke quietly. I thought we'd agreed. Not today. Another man answered. His voice calm. Measured. Impossible to read. History doesn't wait for holidays. Silence. Then Founder Kang's voice. Older. His voice. Steady. This conversation ends here. No. The unfamiliar man replied. It begins here. The tape crackled. Wind swept across the microphone. Someone adjusted the recorder. Then, a sentence that froze both men. If those records become public, people far beyond Korea will disappear. Ji-hoon slowly looked toward Han. Neither spoke. The voice continued. We are not protecting a company. We are protecting governments. Static. Loud. Sudden. The recording skipped. Several seconds disappeared forever. When the sound returned, only one voice remained. Seo Min-jae. Breathing heavily. Speaking directly into the recorder. If anyone ever hears this, I need you to know. I made my choice willingly. No one forced me. If protecting these children means losing my own future, I will accept that. The recording ended. Click. Silence. Neither Ji-hoon nor Han moved. The old cassette player continued spinning quietly, as though reluctant to admit there was nothing left to say. Finally, Chief Han whispered. He wasn't protecting documents. Ji-hoon nodded slowly. He was protecting people. Across Seoul. Debbie sat alone on the balcony of her apartment. The city stretched endlessly before her. Her father's letter rested beside a cup of untouched tea. The photograph remained in her hands. She traced the outline of his smiling face. I wish, she whispered into the night, I could hear your voice. A gentle breeze stirred the pages of the letter. Almost like an answer, though she couldn't know. Just across the river, her father's voice had spoken again for the first time in 22 years. Somewhere else in the city, the silver-haired man from the bookstore stood inside a modest apartment overlooking the Han River. A second cassette player rested on his table. He pressed play, listened to only 5 seconds, then stopped it. His eyes filled with regret. So, he murmured, you finally found the first tape. He opened a drawer. Inside, another cassette. Its label read, Part 2. He quietly switched off the light. The apartment disappeared into darkness. Some recordings preserve memories. Others preserve evidence. But this one had preserved hope. Because somewhere in Seoul, another tape still waited. And inside it was the truth Seo Min-jae never had the chance to finish. Chapter 12. The second tape. The familiar piano returns, now accompanied by a slow orchestra. The melody carries both hope and uncertainty. Dawn approaches once more, and with it comes the realization that every ending is also the beginning of another journey. Some truths arrive all at once. Others reveal themselves one careful heartbeat at a time. Perhaps that is mercy. Because no human heart was ever meant to carry an entire lifetime of truth in a single day. The cassette player remained silent. Ji-hoon still sat beside it. The room had grown darker. Not because the lights had dimmed. Because his understanding of the past had become far more complicated. Seo Min-jae had not disappeared because of greed. He had not vanished because of ambition. He had chosen to disappear. To protect children. Entire families. Perhaps even nations. But from whom? Chief Archivist Han carefully removed the cassette. We know another tape exists. Ji-hoon nodded. Part 2. Han looked toward the photograph of the silver-haired man. If he has it. He has been waiting a very long time. Ji-hoon picked up his phone. Find every surviving employee connected to the Spring Festival of 1998. Han smiled. I already started. Ji-hoon wasn't surprised. Some people became archivists because they loved history. Chief Han became one because he refused to let history disappear. Across the city. Friday morning arrived gently. Brightline Creative buzzed with another demanding workday. Debbie tried to focus on campaign concepts, brand messaging, presentation layouts, employee interviews. But every blank page eventually became her father's letter. Every quiet moment became his voice. Not the sound of it. She still didn't know his voice. Only the rhythm of his heart through written words. Hannah quietly placed a pastry on Debbie's desk. No questions. Debbie smiled. You know me too well. I know emotional eating when I see it. I'm not emotional. You've been staring at the same sentence for 14 minutes. Debbie looked down. She had written only 4 words. Who are you, Dad? She quietly closed the notebook. I miss someone I barely remember. Hannah reached across the desk and squeezed her hand. You remember more than you think. That afternoon, a small envelope arrived at Brightline. No company logo. No postage. Simply delivered by hand. The receptionist called Debbie over. It has your name. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Elegant. Careful. Inside, a cream-colored invitation. Miss Debbie Seo. If you still wish to know who your father truly was, please meet me tomorrow. Saturday. 2 p.m. Seoul Forest. The Old Music Pavilion. Come alone. No signature. Only one small symbol. A phoenix. Encircled by 4 laurel branches. Share this story with someone who believes that hope can survive even the longest silence. And tell us in the comments. What do you think Seo Min-jae was truly protecting? Your theories might be closer to the truth than you realize. Until next time. Thank you for listening. This has been Gangnam Nights, where every secret is connected by a single golden thread.